You found your way to Whims and Whispers, where we don't just tell dark stories, we unearth them. Tonight's mystery is not a legend, not a ghost story. It's real, documented, brutal. A family torn apart on a remote farmstead, and a killer who may have never left. But this case isn't just about blood and snow. It's about the silences between footsteps, the attic that creaked when no one was there, and the suspicion that evil doesn't always knock. Sometimes it moves in quietly. So settle in, dim the lights, because what we're about to uncover is the kind of story that doesn't just haunt a house, it haunts history. Welcome to Whims and Whispers. It began with footprints leading from the forest to the farmhouse, and none leading back. Snow fell thick over the Bavarian countryside, blanketing the earth in a pristine silence. And yet, 6 people lay butchered on a lonely farm, hidden beneath hay, sealed in shadows, and forever buried in mystery. In March of 1922, a chilling stillness swept over Hinterkaifeck, a remote farmstead tucked between groves and frost-covered fields. The Gruber family, known for their isolation and whispered scandals, had vanished without a trace. Chickens clucked. Smoke still rose from the chimney. But no one answered the door. When the townspeople finally entered the home, what they found was a scene ripped from a nightmare. Bodies stacked in the barn like broken dolls. A baby murdered in her crib, and the family's dog pacing, confused, in the blood-streaked yard. And here's what made it worse. Someone had been living there after the killings, feeding livestock, cooking meals, sleeping in their beds. Days before, the family had complained of footsteps echoing in the attic, a lost set of house keys, and a strange newspaper that no one remembered bringing home. Was the killer already inside, watching them? Or had something darker crossed the threshold of Hinterkaifeck that night? What followed would become one of the most disturbing, unsolved mass murders in European history, a case tangled in superstition, family secrets, and something the snow couldn't cover. Welcome to Hinterkaifeck. Once you step into the barn, there's no turning back. The deeper you go into Hinterkaifeck, the colder it gets. 6 days before the murders, it started with sounds. Andreas Gruber, the 63-year-old patriarch of the Hinterkaifeck farm, told neighbors he had heard footsteps in the attic late at night, heavy, deliberate. When he checked, there was no one there. But it wasn't just the footsteps. He found a strange newspaper inside the house, one no one in the family had purchased. Then the house keys went missing. The family dog began to growl at shadows. The maid, terrified by the strange happenings, quit her job, telling friends the house was haunted. Andreas, strict, secretive, and known to be abusive, dismissed it all. Friday, March 31st, 1922. A heavy snow had fallen. On this day, the Grubers vanished. That morning, young Cecilia, only 7 years old, missed school. Then her mother, Victoria, missed church rehearsal. A mailman noticed that the front gate hung open but saw no one, and yet smoke curled from the chimney. Someone was home. No one knew that inside the barn, a nightmare had already unfolded. Discovery, April 4th, 1922. 4 days passed. Neighbors growing uneasy, finally forced their way onto the farm. What they found chilled them to their core. Inside the barn, buried beneath hay and boards, were the bodies of Andreas, Victoria, Cecilia, and Victoria's elderly mother, Cecilia. They had been lured out one by one, each brutally murdered with a mattock, a farm tool similar to a pickaxe. Inside the house, they found the youngest, 2-year-old Joseph, murdered in his crib, and Maria Baumgartner, the new maid who had arrived that very day, her suitcase still packed. But here's the most disturbing part. The farm had been operating in the days after the killings. Animals were fed, meals were eaten, the fireplace had been used. Someone stayed, lived there, with the corpses, the crime scene. Each victim had suffered massive head trauma. Some were barely recognizable. 7-year-old Cecilia had torn out her own hair in terror before dying. There were no signs of forced entry, no valuables taken. The killer had covered the bodies, almost tenderly. Police found strange evidence. Footprints leading from the woods to the barn, but none returning. A locked house, disturbed bedding in the attic, and fingerprints that matched no one. And the murder weapon, eventually discovered, hidden in the farmhouse attic. The place where the footsteps were heard. The investigation. Over 100 suspects were questioned, including vagrants, soldiers, and locals. Neighbors whispered of dark family secrets, that Victoria had an incestuous relationship with her father, that Josef may have been Andreas's son, not grandson, that someone may have snapped or sought revenge. But the police had no solid leads, and as time passed, the trail went cold. The house was torn down the following year. All that remains of Hinterkaifeck is the foundation and 6 crosses 100 years later. Despite DNA advances, modern forensics, and global interest in the case, the Hinterkaifeck murders remain unsolved. There are no known suspects, no known motive, only the chilling thought that the killer may have watched them for days or weeks, listening, waiting, and when the snow fell, they stepped out of the forest and into history. The footprints that appeared, then stopped. Perhaps the most chilling detail, and the one that opens the legend of Hinterkaifeck like a horror novel, is the footprints in the snow. A set of single, isolated footprints was discovered leading from the forest to the back door of the barn, but not a single one returning. The implication: someone approached the home and never left. Or rather, stayed. Andreas had noticed the tracks before the murders, a full 6 days prior. He saw them, searched the property, but found no one. No one ever followed up the footsteps in the attic. Before her death, the previous maid quit her job, claiming the house was haunted. She reported hearing voices and footsteps overhead, especially at night. Andreas himself confirmed this to neighbors. He was awakened multiple nights by sounds of someone pacing in the attic, but each time he investigated, the attic was empty. The new maid, Maria Baumgartner, had just arrived the very day of the murders. Her bags weren't even unpacked. She was dead within hours. The mystery newspaper. A newspaper was discovered in the home, a Munich paper that none of the family subscribed to. No neighbors had lent it to them. No one in the area had received that edition. It appeared without explanation days before the murders. Did the intruder bring it with them? Was it a message? Or was the killer already inside, passing time while watching them? The vanishing keys. Shortly before the murders, the family reported their house keys missing. They didn't change the locks. They didn't notify police. They simply carried on. It was one more unsettling thing in a growing pile of dread. But when the police finally arrived, they found no signs of forced entry, which means whoever committed the murders had a key. The killer stayed. This is what continues to disturb even hardened investigators. For 3 to 4 days after the murders, the farm operated as normal. Smoke was seen from the chimney. Livestock were fed. Milk was taken from the cows. Even the dog, previously aggressive, was found chained up and calm. Inside, beds were slept in. Bread had been eaten, and windows opened and closed from the inside. Whoever committed this massacre lived among the bodies, ate, slept, waited, but for what? The bodies were moved and covered. The murder scene itself was a portrait of savagery and strange mercy. The 4 adults were found in the barn, stacked one atop the other, partially buried under hay and boards. 2-year-old Joseph was found in his cot, murdered in his sleep, a folded shirt covering his tiny body. The maid was found in her bed, blankets pulled over her, as if she had just gone to sleep. Who covers the bodies after a brutal killing? Remorseful stranger? Or someone who knew them? The murder weapon was hidden in the attic. Months after the murders, a bloody mattock, a sharpened farm tool resembling a pickaxe, was found hidden in the attic, the very place where footsteps had been heard. Police theorized it was the weapon, but it was never conclusively linked to the crime. Still, it was stashed away, deliberately. Did the killer plan to return? Cecilia's final moments. 7-year-old Cecilia's body was perhaps the most disturbing. She didn't die instantly. Evidence shows she lay in the barn, alive, for hours, possibly a full night, beside her murdered family. When found, her fingers were shredded, and tufts of her own hair were clenched in her hands. She had torn it out in pure terror, the silence of the animals. One detail overlooked by many: the animals made no noise. No neighbors reported hearing screams, struggles, or even panicked livestock. It was as if the entire farm, every living thing, fell under some dreadful silence as the killer moved. Did they strike swiftly, or had the family been drugged? No evidence of sedatives was ever found. But neither were any defensive wounds. Psychic investigators and the curse of Hinterkaifeck. In the years after the murders, paranormal investigators, psychics, and even mediums visited the area, claiming the land was cursed. The family had been marked. The killer may have been driven by more than just violence. Even descendants of the community began to refer to the place as unholy ground, and some locals insist that when the wind is right, you can still hear the sounds of footsteps in the attic and the distant bleat of animals waiting for an owner who never returned. Clues that lead to nowhere, or to something too dark to face. The Hinterkaifeck farmhouse is gone, razed to the ground. But the mystery, it lingers, like a chill in the attic. Lorenz Schlittenbauer, the neighbor with a key. Most popular theory, still debated. Lorenz was the neighbor who led the group that discovered the bodies. He had once been romantically involved with Victoria Gruber and may have even fathered her youngest child, Joseph. Motives? Victoria had filed a paternity suit against him. He may have been trying to avoid child support payments. He may have believed Joseph was not his, but Andreas's, the result of an incestuous relationship between father and daughter. Lorenz had a key to the house. When he entered the crime scene, he unlocked the door without hesitation. He also moved the bodies in the barn. Strange behavior for someone encountering such horror for the first time. He later contradicted himself during questioning. And his calm demeanor at the scene? Eerily unemotional. Still, no forensic evidence ever tied him to the murders. But many locals remained convinced. It was Schlittenbauer, Victoria's incestuous secret. Was it a crime of shame? Andreas Gruber was known to be a cruel and abusive man. Both he and Victoria had served prison time in 1915 for incest, a charge based on rumors that Andreas had fathered Victoria's children. Some believe the shame of that secret led to revenge or honor-based violence. Could a disgraced relative or religious zealot have killed the entire family to cleanse the sin? Others believe Victoria was planning to leave with Joseph, and someone stopped her. But if this was a crime of passion, why kill the entire household? Why the maid? Why the grandmother? Why the baby? A vengeful ex-soldier, the stranger in the woods. Post-World War I, Germany was filled with traumatized veterans, many destitute, some mentally unwell. Could one have wandered to Hinterkaifeck? There were reports of a drifter seen in the woods days before the murder. He matched no one from the village. And after the killings, he vanished. Some say he was an ex-soldier seeking shelter who snapped. But how did he stay hidden in the attic without being discovered? How did he avoid leaving any trace? Unless he didn't wander into the attic. He was already there. Multiple killers. A coordinated attack? Many investigators over the years have asked, how could one person kill 6 victims, most lured out one by one, without alerting the others? Did the killer use a lure or sound to draw each person to the barn? Or were multiple people involved, ensuring silence and speed? This theory suggests the crime was premeditated, organized, and possibly orchestrated by more than one person with a grudge against the family. And if so, why stay at the farm for days after? Victoria's secret lover, a deadly triangle. Some believe Victoria had a secret suitor, perhaps a former soldier, possibly engaged to her in secret. She was known to keep large amounts of cash in the house, possibly saving to escape. The theory her secret lover discovered her entanglement with her father, or found out about Schlittenbauer and Joseph. Or she broke off the relationship. Rage, betrayal, and jealousy boiled over, and the entire family paid the price. The farmhand theory. Someone inside. Another theory centers on a worker or former farmhand who knew the property intimately. Only someone familiar with the layout of the barn, the daily routines, the attic access, could have navigated so silently and remained undetected. Was the killer a local who once worked for the Grubers? Someone who held a grudge? Again, no leads, no arrest. Just suspicion and silence. The paranormal theory. The house was cursed, and now we enter darker terrain. Some locals believed the Hinterkaifeck farm was cursed, an old site with a violent past. The original name of the area, Kaifeck, loosely translates to place of strife Reports of unseen footsteps, voices in the attic, shadows in the barn go back years before the murder. The family was known to be deeply religious, yet fearful. Some paranormal theorists suggest that something evil entered that home, and the murders were not committed by man, but by something ancient, malevolent, and unseen. The idea seems far-fetched until you consider the dog's eerie behavior, the impossibly silent murders, the covered bodies, and the killer's strange rituals. Living among the dead, the copycat confessions. Decades of false hope. Over the years, dozens have confessed to the crime. Most were proven hoaxes or mentally ill individuals seeking attention. In 2007, German police re-examined the case using modern criminal profiling and reportedly narrowed the suspect list to one person. But that name never released, out of respect for surviving family. Even today, the case file remains partially sealed. The attic watcher, he was already there. A particularly disturbing theory that the killer had been living in the attic for days or weeks, watching the family through the slats and cracks. They would have observed every routine, moved silently at night, waited for the right moment. The footsteps, the missing keys, the newspaper, the uneaten food. This theory fuses psychological horror with real-world stalking cases, like the infamous Denver Spider-Man or the Watcher House. It's the idea that we are never truly alone, that something may be watching, waiting, right above your head. No theory fully fits, and that's the horror. Each theory feels almost right, until you notice what it doesn't explain. Who stayed on the farm for days? Why didn't the animals raise the alarm? Why were the bodies covered with care, but brutally destroyed? And how did no one hear a single scream? At Hinterkaifeck, logic unravels, and what remains is something colder than snow. A village that chose silence. The residents of Grosserloch and Kaifeck, the quiet Bavarian towns near the farm, were never the same. After the murders, people stopped speaking freely about the Grubers. Neighbors grew suspicious of one another. Children were warned not to talk to outsiders. Some believed the killer was still among them. Others believed speaking about it would draw evil into their own homes. To this day, older generations in the region still lower their voices when asked about Hinterkaifeck, as if the place, or the name, still holds power, a place erased, but not forgotten. In 1923, the farmhouse was demolished. Locals feared it had become a house of the dead. The land was left empty. No new building has ever stood there. But something peculiar happened. People began visiting the site. Not tourists, not families, but curious wanderers, folk historians, and those seeking answers. A simple memorial of 6 iron crosses now stands in a clearing, half swallowed by the forest. Locals say that on cold nights, the wind still howls through the trees, and sometimes you can hear a baby cry, the myth of the attic watcher. Across Germany, especially in rural folklore, the case gave birth to a legend, the attic watcher. Stories began to spread about ghosts, demonic lodgers, and killers who live in attics, waiting for the right moment. Parents would warn misbehaving children, "If you don't listen, the watcher from Hinterkaifeck will hear you and come down the ladder." it became a modern folk tale. A German urban legend grounded in reality that blurred the line between truth and nightmare. The unhealable wound of post-war Germany. Set just 4 years after World War I, the Hinterkaifeck case is often viewed as a symbol of a fractured Germany, a brutal, faceless violence that mirrored the trauma of war, a father scarred by nationalism and violence, a society where silence was safer than truth. The horror of the case wasn't just in the bloodshed, it was in how no one came forward, how no one heard anything, how the entire community chose not to see. It became a symbol of collective repression, a theme that would echo again during World War II. Influence on media, art, and film. The eerie details of the case, the attic, the footsteps, the killer living among the dead, have inspired numerous horror films, books, and shows. The Strangers, 2008. Hush, 2016. The Black Coat's Daughter, 2015. The Haunting of Hill House, Netflix. The idea of unseen things dwelling in hidden places. Even true crime podcasts and YouTube creators return to Hinterkaifeck again and again because the case never lets go. It taps into something primal. The idea that the place we feel safest, our home, can become a hunting ground. Modern fear of silent intruders. In recent decades, reports of real-life frogging, people secretly living in someone else's home, have shaken society. In Japan, a man discovered a woman living in his cupboard for over a year. In the US, homeowners have found strangers hiding in crawl spaces, garages, even closets. Hinterkaifeck may be the first known case that suggested this terrifying idea. Someone may be living with you, watching, waiting. It introduced a cultural fear that has only intensified in the modern age, where security cameras, smart locks, and motion sensors still can't catch everything. Ancestral shame, the stain that carried forward. Descendants of both the victims and the suspected villagers often refuse interviews. Some changed their surnames, some moved away, some were never told the truth by their own parents. One man, the great-grandson of Schlittenbauer, publicly asked for the case to be closed forever, stating, "Every theory is a scar on someone's family." The cultural ripple effect of the crime was generational. Even now, the case carries a haunting social taboo, a reminder that sometimes the horror isn't just what happened, but what we let ourselves forget. The eternal, unfinished sentence. Perhaps the most chilling echo of all is this: no one knows who did it. Not then. Not now. And maybe never. The idea that 6 lives could be ended in such a brutal, intimate, impossibly silent way, with no justice, no closure, and no face to blame, has embedded itself in the modern obsession with unsolved mysteries. Hinterkaifeck stands beside cases like Jack the Ripper, the Black Dahlia, the Zodiac Killer, not just for the brutality, but for the way we still talk about it 100 years later, because some stories refuse to be buried. 6 souls lost. One silence that still speaks. We return now from Hinterkaifeck, but the questions stay behind. Who walked through the snow with murder in their heart and never walked back? Who lived with the dead, not for hours, but for days, cooking meals, stoking fires, listening to the wind rattle through the attic rafters? Was it a man twisted by shame, a stranger shaped by war, a shadow that doesn't cast footprints, no name, no face, No closure, only the feeling that something watched, something waited, and something still lingers in the cracks of that vanished farmhouse. If this mystery stirred something in you, a chill, a question, a whisper, then you already know. This won't be the last time you visit the dark. This has been Whims and Whispers. If tonight's mystery held you, share it with someone who still listens to the dark. Tap subscribe so you don't miss the next voice that speaks from the stillness. And remember, sometimes the scariest stories are the ones that never end. Until next time, stay curious, stay cautious, and be careful where the footsteps lead.